make you host.
Okay, welcome everybody to our first round of Student Career Internship Program presentations. We've one today and one at the same time next week, so hopefully y'all can join us again next week. So we have there are 8 total career interns, half of them are presenting today, and then half will present next week. So I'm going to give just a brief presentation on the overview and format of this program, some ideas that we have for future programming, and then we'll go into presentations. And so today we have Hayley Bricker and Davie Loria, who worked with Scott Johnson and Emily Zawacki on SciComm. And we'll have Kitri Spencer, who was one of 2 educational and data resources intern with Beth. And then last but not least, Quincey will give us her take on what it was like to be an Alaska field engineer working with Ryan Bierma. So quick overview. So this is the ERSCOPE Student Career Internship Program. This came from the UNAVCO side of things, where we had a program that brought in mostly upper level undergraduates as well as graduate students and postgraduates who were working directly with staff on the scope of the company's mission. And so when we became ERSCOPE, we adopted it into the ERSCOPE Student Career Internship Program. Career interns, or career internship for short. And the difference here is that this offers a real world work experience. And so if you're not familiar, ERSCOPE has 3 internship programs that we're hosting now. The other 2 are focused on research. These positions are not research focused. So they are contributing to the work that ERSCOPE does every day. And so undergraduate students, graduate students, and recent grads are all eligible. And each student is funded by the directorate. So if that student is working in instrumentation, their stipends and things are coming from that project. So it's typically been a program around 11 weeks in the summer. An intern can actually be called an intern legally up to 15 weeks. We have in the past offered remote or in-person options. We have the majority of our interns working remotely, obviously, since we're a remote first organization, except for Quincey, who got to work up in Alaska in person. We do 1 week during week 1 of orientation activities. In the past, we've done a mix of in-person and online. This year, the orientation week was all virtual. We really want these students, the goal is that they become integral members of the team. So they're attending staff meetings, they're meeting other people on the team, they're getting a really good view into what it's like to be working in an organization. They're invited to attend the professional development series that Anika and I lead for the Recess and Geo Launchpad interns. And so this is looking at like resumes and cover letters all the way to like applying to graduate school. And it's great because a lot of times when career interns do come, if they've had experience, a little bit more experience in these areas, it's nice to have them offer some advice and experience to the other interns. And then at the end of the summer, they're required to do a talk, which is why we're all here today. Some things that we're considering for next year, can we have career interns any time of the year? Or does it, does it have to be the summer? Non-science positions, we'd love to see more students come from non-science backgrounds. We have jobs at ERSCOPE that do all kinds of things. And so, why couldn't we have someone working with, accounting or with HR, or I'd love to get career interns down at the Epic, like working in the warehouse. And we're really working, we'd like to have an intern to ERSCOPE staff track. And the way that we've done this so far is that all of the career interns this year will get put on our internal job list. And so that they're able to see those positions before they go out to everybody, and hopefully it makes it a little bit less competitive. We won't go to that slide yet. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first pair of interns. They'll be presenting together. So Hayley and Davie, please go ahead and share your screen and take it away.
Can everyone see the screen? Okay, cool. So yeah, my name's Davie, and the other SciComm intern that I worked with was Hayley. We were science communications career interns working with Scott Johnson and Emily Zwacky.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Hayley. Just for some background, so I have gotten all of my degrees, my bachelor's, my master's at UCLA, and I'm still at UCLA finishing up my PhD in paleoclimate. Hopefully a little under a year from now, I will be done. My past work in science communication is mainly video production and a little bit of writing. So on the left-hand side, I have some screenshots of videos I've produced for Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles. So 2 videos that you can go watch. We talk about planetary science. In the center, I have a screenshot of the writing that I've done. So this is for the Center for Diverse Leadership for Science at UCLA. I founded and manage a blog called Climate Currents. And then I have some pictures just on the right-hand side. So I'm a trail runner. I love being outside. And there's a picture of me at Crater Lake.
And I'm Davie. I'm from New York. I got my undergraduate degree in physics at the George Washington University with a minor in journalism. So that was my way of kind of making a SciComm degree when my school didn't have one. And I'm currently a graduate student at Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, New Jersey. So I got a certificate in photonics, and then I'll get a physics master's and PhD in probably about 2 years. Some previous experience I was an intern at Penn America, and I did an interview with author Lindsay Fitzharris. I wrote an article for one of my classes, and it ended up getting published at Planet Forward, which is affiliated with GW. And I was a previous intern, a communications intern at Sciline through AAAS, and I did a bunch of interviews with scientists and creating kind of a matchmaking service for scientists and journalists who needed a source for a story. So we're just going to go through some of our goals that we had coming into the internship. So some of mine were I wanted to have a really good portfolio of articles. I had a couple of things, but I never really got a chance to formally write and publish something. I also wanted to learn more about earth science and geophysics because I didn't have a ton of background in that. There was no geophysics degree at GW. And I wanted to learn a lot of Adobe Illustrator and other Adobe Suite applications because I didn't have a ton of experience with most of them.
So like Davie, I have many of the same goals. So building out more of a professional writing portfolio that isn't just self-published work. And then I wanted to learn how a science communications job would function, and also work on graphic design since I have just been limited to making figures for scientific manuscripts. So getting more well-versed with Adobe.
So to start off, we kind of did a bunch of things together, especially in the beginning to kind of get used to things. And then we kept doing things together just because we enjoyed it. So these are just some of the things that we worked on together.
So our first project that we worked on together was actually one of the intern spotlights. So we interviewed Quincey, who again is in the call. We basically met over Zoom with Quincey since they're in Alaska. We used otter.ai, which is an AI transcription tool to basically be our transcriber so we could focus on talking with Quincey and really getting a good conversation going, and then use that to fill in basically the transcription of the interview for the WordPress post. Next slide. We also worked on making thumbnails for a video on deep earthquakes. So we did sort of like an A/B test where we would see which of our thumbnails would perform best in terms of like attracting viewers to the actual video. So we used Adobe Illustrator to make both of these thumbnails. Davie's is on the left and mine is on the right. We ultimately found out that A/B testing doesn't really work well for us, partially because we're limited by having not that many viewers on some of these videos, but also it seems to be browser dependent. So we kind of figured out that, yeah, one browser will choose one thumbnail and stick with it no matter what, and another will choose the other and stick with it no matter what. But interesting to learn. Okay, so next slide. We also helped Scott and Emily put on a short course for science communication. So that looked like helping to facilitate the actual workshop during the short course during the workshop. And also we did pre and post surveys to figure out who our audience was, what they wanted to work on in the course of the workshop, things like that. And Davie, I think this one's your slide.
Oh, sorry. We also did a combined intern interview together through a podcast kind of format just to try a different medium. We used Riverside.fm, which was a way to kind of record on two ends rather than just one person recording it, both of them, so that one of them's kind of grainy. So that was really fun to work on together. We also had a really cool opportunity to write for the Yellowstone Caldera Chronicles, their weekly update. So we wrote about, if anyone remembers, back in May, there was huge auroras that kind of went farther than they normally do. So we wrote about how auroras are formed in general, and then how some of the stations at Yellowstone actually were able to track and monitor them. And we talked about the station that EarthScope has there and just things like that, how stations are able to track solar storms. We also made some bumper sticker options for Shakeler and then also just for earthquake awareness. So Hayley's is on the left, mine is on the right. We both worked with a bunch of socials. So every time a post went up, we would call to different social media channels without having to log into each one individually. So you can see here's like an intern interview, here's another intern interview. So here's our joint podcast, things like that. So those are all up on the socials now. And then the last thing we kind of did was create GIFs that went up on EarthScope's Giphy. So these two are some videos that Hayley will show us in a bit. And then some of these are from the Deep Earthquakes video that were condensed into GIFs.
So I split up sort of my portfolio of things into a couple different sections. The first will be the next slide. So intern interviews. So I interviewed 3 people total. My first interview alone was with Kitri, who's also in this call and has a lot of really cool things to show about the educational resources that they've been working on. And so that is highlighted in that interview if you'd like to go read it. I then also got the opportunity to interview the 2 recess interns that are located in Fairbanks, Alaska right now. So Delaney and Izzy, who are 2 really cool outdoorsy people that have been able to enjoy the Alaskan wilderness while working with the geophysics folks at Fairbanks on a volcanic system in Alaska. So you can also go read that interview. I also have been working on a couple of what are concept pages within geophysics. So the first one that I've published so far is GPS and volcanoes. So it's kind of an example of how GPS instrumentation has been used to monitor 3 examples of volcanic eruptions or activities. And so on the right-hand side of this slide, I created this graphic. This is specific to Kilauea, which is not Mount St. Helens on the left-hand side. It's later down in the article, but I did create a little cross-sectional view of the magma plumbing system feeding that volcano. And so the other 2 projects that I have going, they're still not up, but they're in the works. So I'm working on a broader article about volcano monitoring and its importance to society. And then the last project, so next slide, please, will be a general page about borehole strain meters. So I'm currently finishing this up. I interviewed a former intern who is now a PhD scientist doing a Mendenhall postdoc in Golden, Cassie Hannigan. So if anyone knows her, she's a good friend of mine. And so Davie and I will actually be working to finish this up. And then the last sort of section of work that I've been able to do is news and features articles, which have largely been sort of plain language summaries of scientific papers that have been using EarthScope instrumentation or geodesy and seismology tools. So the first article that I did was sort of a write-up of how synchronously draining glacial lakes in Greenland seem to affect one another based on changes in stress across the ice sheet. And so not only did I write that article, but I did a little video animation which is, it's about 30 seconds long, so we'll see if we'll get through it, but you can go view that on the page itself. And we also made it a GIF in our Giphy archive to be used broadly to explain the concept. And so that was the first time that I've ever used Adobe After Effects for animation. It's the first time I've ever animated at all, and it was a really good exercise to get familiar with Illustrator, but then pull that all into a new software. Okay. And then the second article that I worked on was a paper about pairing machine learning with GNSS and INSAR data to see if a machine learning algorithm could predict eruptions at a particular volcano in the Patagonian region. So I wrote the article, but I also created sort of an explainer, a graphical explainer, which is what you see towards the left-hand side here. So it kind of goes through the methodology of the research paper and explains like what the open questions are still for this type of work. So I used QGIS to actually create the map, and then I used Adobe Illustrator to stitch it all together. And I'm really proud of this graphic on this page. I didn't come up with it out of thin air. It's actually based on Dr. Roland Bergman's one of his papers. He has a graphic that kind of explains the link between climate change and seismicity. So that was actually a workshop or a session, I should say, at the community science workshop, kind of tying together some science about climate and seismicity. So I created a nicer version of that figure in Illustrator. And then lastly, I just did some writing on, so Caves of the Moon was a pretty big thing that came out recently. So the first confirmed lunar cave was discovered. Couldn't pass that up because INSAR was used to confirm that. And then I tried my hand at writing about how ambient noise tomography can be used to image aquifers. And then lastly, I still actually have about 4 different articles that are in the publication queue. So you will be hearing more from me on the Earthscope site.
Okay, so mine is also split up in a similar format. So starting with the intern interviews I did 3. I did 1 career intern, Mark Garcia, and 2 recess interns, Juan Cruz, who is in Boulder, and Summer, who is working at Sandia in Albuquerque. And then I also did a couple of what is pages for the website. The first project that I had taken on in the first what is page is about distributed acoustic sensing, or DAS, and I became kind of obsessed with it. So I wrote this page, and then there were no really great graphics that I saw. So this was kind of my first Illustrator project. I made these graphics. At one point it was a water, a land, and this like close-up one you see, and then I combined it into 2. And then I created one big poster about DAS. So this was something that I was really, really proud of. Then I did a what is TLS, terrestrial laser scanning, similar kind of format, just a basic overview, how it's used, some applications, some that are linked to Earthscope. And then I did a what is UAS, or uncrewed aerial systems. So again, same kind of thing. This one also includes information about structure from motion, again, some applications, and just a good kind of explainer for an intro on UAS. So then I also did a bunch of news and feature articles. So the first one that I did was about Kilauea. There was a paper that was released about modeling kind of what happened in the caldera that was created. So this just is an overview of the paper and also kind of what happened during the event, the timeline. So that was one of the first ones that I did. Another one was after the Sage Gauge workshop that we had. A lot of the talks were about different tools in our geophysical toolkit. So this was just kind of going through a bunch of the different things like GNSS, INSAR, DAS. Also, again, you can see my little graphic here. So just kind of going through all the different tools in the geophysical toolkit. Another one I did was looking at remote sensing applications during armed conflict and how it can be used. So we have 3 different examples. We have looking at the Gaza Strip and the level of destruction using remote sensing. We have Ukraine and looking at where mines are buried. And then we also have Syria looking at the deforestation as a result of people having to flee and be relocated. So this is just 3 different examples of using geophysics in a very practical and humanitarian sense. Another one I did was about a paper that was released about natural hazards, putting some species at an even bigger risk of extinction. And then the last one I did was a tie into the new Twisters movie that was released about how a few studies have actually shown that they can use stations to detect seismic signals from when the tornado touches down on the ground, which is a really cool application that a lot of people just surprisingly happened across while they were looking for other things in their research. And so just some concluding thoughts that we have. Here's a list of a bunch of the tools that we used. If you're curious about all the different things that we had access to and that were helpful. And then if you want to keep up with us, our portfolio. But I think both of us are very happy with the portfolio that we've created, the things that we've gained, and just the experience that we had overall.
Yeah, echoing that, definitely checked off all 3 of my broad goals. So I think Davie and I both got a lot of experience.
And we'd like to say thank you to our mentors, Scott and Emily, and a bunch of other people listed that have helped us and given us a bunch of opportunities.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to work at EarthScope.
Hooray. So busy, lots of things. Does anyone, we have a few minutes for questions. If anybody has questions, comments for Davie and Hayley.
I have a question.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you very much for the presentation. That was very informative. I'm curious for both of you, like what did you find the most surprising about your internship, like in terms of what you expected and what you experienced?
I would actually say that the remote work was surprisingly more productive than I thought it would be. Because most of my PhD has been remote because of COVID. California had pretty strict restrictions on return to the workplace. And so my context was it's like very hard to communicate with people and get things done, but I didn't find that to be the case during this internship. So Davie and I were constantly talking on Slack, and we had a meeting pretty much every single day with Scott and Emily, and we're in contact about articles over Slack. So really communicative, as probably should be in a SciComm internship.
Thanks.
I would say, I guess, learning about the difference between a topic versus a story. So while any kind of explainer is always helpful, it's always relevant, a new research comes out and it's great, but you also want to find a way that it's applicable to either, if you're working here, a geophysics kind of aspect, or just making people interested in it. So finding an actual story and actual purpose is really cool, really surprising.
Awesome. Go ahead, Shelley.
Thanks.
Hi, thank you for these presentations. It just blows me away how much you guys had finished throughout the summer, and so many great articles that you've developed. Going back to the interview and discussion about the auroras and Yellowstone, and you mentioned that stations could track the solar storms, but I couldn't see detail enough. What kinds of stations were tracking the solar storms? And how were you getting that data?
So our understanding is, so there are EarthScope GPS stations in Yellowstone. We did not necessarily look at any of that data ourselves. It was more of like a conceptual explainer of, oh, these can be used to kind of understand ionospheric activity during solar storms from the ground, rather than having to have instrumentation in the ionosphere that monitors during a storm. So more of like a conceptual explainer of what happened during the May event, and that there actually was a signal recorded in the data in the park. We, did not look at the data ourselves or do any sort of like interpretation of it, though.
Okay, thank you.
During really intense solar storms, it can mess with a lot of different systems, including like it can affect agriculture and things like that. So you can see in these are just a couple of different example stations. So normally it looks like this, and at this time is when the auroras started happening and we could see them a bit more. So it kind of scatters the signal and disrupts things for a while.
That's great to know. Yeah. Well, thank you again.
Hey, thank you again, Hayley and Davie. Great job. Kitri, you are next. Feel free to take it away.
Okay, I'll share my screen in just a moment. Ooh, okay, there we go. Can everyone see that?
Looks great.
Yay, thank you. Okay, I guess I'll go. So yeah, thank you everybody so much for coming to this talk about essentially what I did over the summer, updating the Iguana GPR modules as well as piloting the community contribution tool with Beth, my mentor, and fellow intern Ann Thomas. So go here. There we go. So a little bit about me. I'm Kitri Spencer. I'm finishing my master's in applied environmental geoscience. I defend literally next week. So that's going to be interesting. The pictures to the right here are one of them. This was the top one was actually part of my master's work in teaching the curriculum that I created for place-based field trip through the San Juan River in southern Utah. And so I got my BS from in environmental science from UC Davis. I also love volunteering, and so I have a lot of informal teaching experience from that. And I also worked as a tide pool educator, so I've got some instructional design background as well as some informal teaching experience. And so one common thread through this internship, and definitely got me to rethink a lot of my past work, is what makes an educational, like either activity or module, robust. And these are a few of the responses we actually got from the workshop at the EER, which I'll mention a little bit later. So in order to make content robust, it needs to be accessible, so able to work across platforms from either mobile to laptop, as well as accessible for people of all ability levels. It also needs to be relevant to students in particular, data that probably doesn't have to be updated constantly, that students can reference for a long time and has meaning to them. And finally, something that is rigorous, where students actually get to work with the data, manipulate it themselves, process it, and make their own interpretations. And so in the spirit of those three things, EarthScope has either helped facilitate or has helped on so many amazing educational resources that are freely available to educators through SERC, the Science Education Resource Center, which is this large online repository of all things earth science lesson related. And I'm highlighting the Iguana and Getsi modules here because I worked on these in particular. And these activities, like I said, are freely available and they've been peer reviewed. They're wonderful activities. However, especially over time, there is the possibility for these activities to degrade as, you know, the internet changes. That may lead to links that are missing in these things, or resources that we can't find anymore. The data may become out of date after a while. And also some of these resources may not have been designed with accessibility in mind. So things like they're not colorblind friendly, so can't be seen by everyone. There may not be alt text associated with the images. So those using screen readers may not be able to access the visual material, among other things. So in order to help remedy some of these barriers, I worked on, for one thing, updating the Iguana GPR module, which included page updates on like the circ page updates themselves, mostly changes to wording, changes to some of the images as well, and updating some of the links there. I also went in and updated the PowerPoint presentations associated with these lessons for better contrast and readability. Alt text included with all the images, all the links and animations are working now. And one of my favorite parts was adding some new graphics. I also created actually quite a few new activities and guides for both the kind of EPIC overall for educators to either be able to get get equipment from the EPIC from us, and also a couple of new data-rich activities that allow students to work directly with GPR data, even if they don't necessarily have access to a GPR unit themselves. So the second big goal, so as I mentioned, I worked on the GPR module in particular, but there's so many other modules that need these kinds of updates themselves. And, definitely more than one intern can take on, even like an entire team to take on. So who better to update these modules than the community themselves, who actually uses these resources with their classes in real time. So part of Anne and my job was to kind of test run the community contribution tool prior to the conference at the Earth Educators Rendezvous, where we got to kind of beta test the tool with educators who, some of them had even written the modules that they were updating themselves. And so some of the lessons learned there were definitely focusing on the data. I like to think of it as data triage, that there's so many things we could update in these modules, whether it's small typos, or maybe, oh, this could be worded a little bit better. So there's a lot of potential to kind of lose the forest for the trees there. And so we kind of had to redirect and really focus on the data-rich activities. And some of the activities, whether they just needed updates or the data sets needed to be entirely replaced because maybe they weren't in the same place that they were before, that focus so that the activities could be usable. And then if there's time, perhaps going back, making those changes to wording and maybe making those smaller updates. And jumping off of that, also, we wanted to preserve the spirit of the activity or the module. A lot of these have already been through a rigorous peer review process. And I think especially in the workshop, since there was such an amazing team of educators, there were so many, oh, we could tweak this project, we could make a new activity for this. There's so much more opportunity for learning for students here. But in order to preserve what had already been done and not have to go through an extra review process, it was important not to reinvent the wheel, to really focus in on just making those updates so that the resource that is already present is still usable. And finally, for me in particular, it was amazing being in the room with these passionate educators. There were so many ideas and some really dynamic discussions and conversations. And that was awesome for me to see, because truth be told, I was a little bit worried, like, oh, I hope these are getting used. They absolutely are. The resources on CERC are being used so widely, and there's such a dedicated community of educators who are able to update these. So even if we don't always agree, the updates are in great hands. And yeah, a huge thank you to Mentor Beth, fellow intern Anne, our intern community, and thank you so much for the opportunity to work at EarthScope.
Meant to stop the timer. And Kitri made it home from Philadelphia, even though she was stuck.
Got stuck, yeah. Got stuck for an extra week, but I survived.
Funny now, not funny then, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, no. I was crying in the airport then.
Oh, Awful. Okay, questions for Kitri. Shelley, go ahead.
Hi, Kitri. Great presentation and really interesting work that you did this summer. Yeah, I'd love to get through some of those modules and pull them into some of the work that I do for the K-12 arena or 6-12. So you mentioned that during the workshop, there were definitely creative faculty who are like, ooh, this could be an extension, and I could do this and that. What techniques did you guys use to keep the creative folks from like spinning off and start working on things like that?
Ooh, so a lot of it was, truth be told, mostly verbal, since we did leave time in the workshop for discussions as well as kind of think, pair, share in our smaller groups. And I think especially in the later days of the workshop, we kind of had to have more regroups in the morning to say, to explain the review process that these modules had already gone through, to explain, if we were to make a new activity, it would warrant a whole new review process. And also several of the participants had been through the review camp themselves. So, and that was also some really useful input that we had about kind of how these activities are reviewed. So it was mostly regroup, especially at the beginning of sessions. And we also did kind of, monitor the room a little bit, Anne and I and Beth and the other conveners, to help people with, there were challenges that we didn't see coming with updating some of these modules. So yeah, I hope that made sense. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and it's something that I've run across multiple times. I mean, we ended up putting up a flipboard. It's like, go write your idea down. So it's captured, acknowledgement that it's, a cool idea. And now let's go back and focus on this specific box that we're working in. But thank you. That I think the think, pair, share and the sharing out and kind of the reminders definitely, yeah, those sound like great ways to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just as an extra detail, we also had the workspace for the participants as well. That was on the CERC workshop page. So that helped too, kind of being able to record those ideas. Yeah. Thank you. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Kitri. Thanks for the overview of that. I wondered if you were thinking ahead towards, you said there's more work than you could possibly do as one intern working over the summer. But as you look ahead, I wondered if there were things that you could see as a path forward for next steps for some of this, besides just, more hands to come in and do some of the lifting.
So I definitely think the community contribution tool has a lot of potential. I could still foresee, and it's nothing on the developers. I think it's just the process of further beta testing the community contribution tool, seeing what other kinds of potential, since, I think a lot of that data will come from the users themselves. So I could see further refinement of that. I could also very much see, one comment we got a lot during the workshop was advertising the community contribution tool, making sure that the community knows about it, because that's, the fuel to this fire. So, and we had some CERC staff members who were willing to help with that. I could even maybe foresee something with either EarthScope, whether it's like social media or posting on a website, hey, we have this new tool, give this a try, even getting the word out about the resources themselves as well. Things like our Giphy page, which I used on some of my master's work, things like those activities. Yeah, I think emphasizing the community aspect of that, a lot of our participants were also wondering, like, who do we contact to make these edits? And unfortunately, some of the original authors for these modules have spread to the four winds. We may not be able to find them. And that's where the emphasis on, like, it's you now, it's up to you, you can update these. So in that way. And then, yeah, unfortunately, more hands for updating some of the more complex issues. I think with some, not that they have major issues, but there were some things we ran into during the workshop that may even be a little bit too complex for community sourcing. So perhaps getting staff on those types of complex, for example, some data sets have changed, so especially regarding climate change, have changed so much that it almost changes the nature of the learning objectives of the activity that it's drawing from. So having eyes on those kinds of complex issues with kind of a more dedicated team, I could see. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it definitely did. And the piece about communication of the tool itself, I think was a really good point and something that will also be needed. So great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sounds like we need a SciComm intern to write a feature news article about CCT. Great job, Kitri. Okay.
Well, I will stop sharing. I am out of here, or not out of here, but you know.
Thank you. Good job. All right. And now we'll hand it over to Quincey. It's our final intern presenting today. And Quincey, let me know. I'm happy to share my screen.
I hope that it'll let me share the screen.
Quincy's in Alaska where the Wi-Fi is.
Can everyone see this?
I can see it. It's
okay.
perfect. Yeah.
I think it's working then. So I think
okay.
We're good.
Great. Take it away.
Okay, awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Quincey, and I was this summer's Alaska Field Engineer career intern, and I had a really wonderful time in this role. I enjoyed it so much. I got to visit a lot of places and learn a lot of new skills, but I wasn't really working on one single project during the summer, so this is just going to be an overview of sort of everything I did, and I separated that work into 3 main categories. But first, a little bit about me. I am currently an undergrad at Georgia Tech, and I'm going into my 4th year studying solid earth and planetary science. And I've also been doing research on the normal faults in the outer rise zone of the Puerto Rico Trench. But I really want to work as a field engineer in the future, so that was why I applied to this role and was super excited to get it. So the first type of work that I did was in the office. I'm up here in Anchorage. And I got to see a lot about the logistics that go into field work. And I got to help out a little bit with that by helping to find and book lodging sometimes. But it was really great to see the whole process and all of the planning that takes place before we even leave the building to go and repair a site. And some of the really valuable tools that I saw us use during this was going through previous write-ups from the past field engineers, because that could tell us exactly what happened at the site recently and help us to decide what equipment we wanted to bring and what type of upgrades were going to take place. And another tool that I used was, we have a really large company database with photos of the sites, and before the engineers leave a site after installing it or maintaining it, they take a lot of pictures. And so I was able to go through and see the pictures for the sites we were going to visit before I even got to the place. And that helped me to really prepare for where I was going to be and what the site would look like. And speaking of that photo database, that was another big project that I took on this summer. There was a large backlog of photos from engineers in the company, because when you upload the photos, there's also a tagging system so that we can keep track not just of what site that took place at, but also what's in the picture. And so I basically went through for a lot of the sites. I did 310 total sites, and I uploaded all those photos, went through them, made sure they were all properly tagged. And it was kind of time consuming, but I did it for 6,212 images. And I was really proud that I got through the entire backlog. And I really felt throughout it that I was doing a project that would help other engineers. And I knew that because I was using previous engineers' photos before I went to sites. And it was also just really fun because I felt a little bit like a detective. For example, before we leave the site, we'll take pictures of the monument from the 4 cardinal directions. But when people would give me their photos, they usually didn't say what directions they were. And so that was a small task I had, was trying to decide which direction to tag it with. And I ended up going through and finding previous photos from the site and trying to match the landscape. And from there, I could make my guesses. And to double check my work, I would always arrange them in order and make sure that it looked like a continuous landscape. And for some of the sites, this was a lot easier than others. There was some where it was just bushes on all 4 sides, and I had to kind of give up because I couldn't tell all the bushes apart. But I think for the most part, I was really successful, and I enjoyed this task a lot. The second type of work I did was in the warehouse. A lot of this was right after the logistics, deciding what we wanted to pack and bring on our trips, and also unpacking from the field, making sure everything was clean, put back where it needed to be, and that our waste was properly disposed of. But I also got to work on the testing and setting up of equipment before we went into the field. And so my favorite test that I did was swapping out the LNAs of our antennas. That was really fun because you can see one of the antennas right here. You take this gray dome off and then work inside of there. So I got to kind of take it apart and put it back together, and I felt sort of like a little antenna surgeon, and I really like those kind of jobs. I also helped with receiver testing and also with Starlink testing, which I really enjoyed as well. I'd heard a lot about Starlink, but I didn't know anything about the system. And so I got a lot of work on setting up Starlinks, on testing them, and then putting them in the field. And then the last and probably most exciting stuff I did this summer was the field work. And I've put a map here. This shows all of our sites are in the green and white, but I put these yellow diamonds showing places that I visited this summer. And the tasks that I did at each site, it really depended on the station and the trip. But most of the tasks that I did, you can see over here on the left, I was swapping batteries. I was helping to clear trees and bushes away from the monument, upgrading sites from VSAT to Starlink. I got to help a bit with the helicopter work from the ground, helping it with slinging batteries. And I also learned how to install the solar panels and the back panels. And I really enjoyed the variety of tasks, and also how as the summer went on, I could feel my competency increasing because I would be repeating something like rewiring the batteries at multiple sites. And so I would get faster and I would get more confident. And because I was faster, I would then be able to take on new tasks and learn new things. So I'm now going to share some photos from the field. And I put a little map in the top left corner. This was all from the first part of the summer when we visited Kodiak Island, except for this photo here, which is me doing bear training. The bear training was great. I got to learn a lot about bear behavior and also practice shooting, which is really useful up here in Alaska where there's a lot of bears. But the Kodiak trip was just my second week in the field, so I felt really valued that Ryan, who was supervising me, let me come along on this trip. It was great. I just jumped right in, and I got to learn about what the sites looked like, and also how to replace the batteries and swap out the antennas. For the middle part of the summer, I was working with Dorta, who's another one of our field engineers, and we did a road trip repairing 6 different sites along Alaska's internal road system. We saw a 7th one as well. And this was really great because I got to learn more about the power system, and Dorta is a really talented person who had a lot to share with me, and I really appreciated that trip, and I learned a lot and got to see some really beautiful sites. And then sort of the last place that we visited were in southern Alaska. I got to see Talkeetna, Homer, Sitka, and Port Alexander. And Port Alexander in particular was really useful as a final site for me to help repair because it had gotten destroyed in a storm. So pretty much everything had to be rebuilt. And so I got to see every component get worked on. And it was a great sort of capstone last site. And I was working with Leah, who is also really talented. And so I took away 3 main lessons from working in the field about how to be a successful field engineer. And the first one is the balance between planning and on-the-spot problem solving. We would do a lot of planning, but on every trip, something would go wrong. And Ryan would always really affectionately refer to the Alaska factor, which was that the only thing you can count on is that something is going to go in a way that will break the plan in some unfathomable way. And I came to really look forward to that because I got to see how these field engineers came up with solutions on the fly and how that attitude going into it really helped us to be successful. And the second lesson that I learned was how important local connections are, not just that we can get favors from the locals, but so that we can be respectful and they can respect our site. I noticed that every town we went to, Ryan would know not just about the town layout as it is now, but a lot about its history. And Leah would also make a really big effort to talk to locals and explain what our sites did. And that really helped to increase the respect between both sides, I think. And it taught me that our sites don't just exist in a bubble. And then the last lesson I took away was how all the different components of the site contribute to its success. I got to see how the batteries and the solar panels contributed to powering the station, how the antenna and receiver got us the data, and how the enclosure kept everything safe. And I got to see not only that, but how all of these smaller stations contribute to a wider network that helps EarthScope's mission carry forwards. And I'd like to give a special thanks to these people, especially Ryan, who taught me so much, not just about the field, but also about music, who was really great. Leah and Dorta also worked in the field with me. Summer helped me a lot with some of the technical stuff in the warehouse, and Kelsey and Anika took care of us interns. So thank you so much.
Fantastic, Quincy. Good job. A lot of amazing work. Questions for Quincy? See, I think Michael, you were first.
Yeah, just a quick question about your sort of schedule. You were up in Alaska a little bit earlier than some of the other career interns, and I wondered how that worked out for you to sort of fit your training in and sort of have a jump start on getting going with your internship, and then sort of meeting up with the other interns, a little later on.
Yeah, I came up here right at the end of April, so it was a lot earlier. And it worked out because SSA was taking place here in Anchorage and I was doing a poster session there. So I was able to come up a lot earlier because of that. And the work that I did sort of before all of the other interns were onboarded was doing the predator training for the bear. That was something I did the first week. And then I kind of got a little bit of work in the warehouse, but it was really only a week before I was immediately in the field. And so coming up early meant that I was able to visit Kodiak Island. And most of the training that I learned was more on the site. Just like we got out there and they would give me a task and teach me how to do it, and then I would do it. And I did some training in the warehouse with learning about the different parts, but most of it just happened sort of on the fly once we got to the site.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead, Shelley.
Yeah, great experiences that you had this summer. And so I was wondering, how were your expectations for what you're going to do this summer with the field work and other field experiences, like similar and different from the reality of what you did?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So I definitely got to see a lot more field work than I thought I was going to. I'd only been out in the field once before, and it was this most recent semester that I did at school. We did a week of field work in the Mojave Desert, and that was really fun, but I'm also from the Mojave Desert, so I was very aware of my surroundings there. I'd been near the site before. Coming up here, it was a completely different environment. I'm from Nevada, so coming up in late April in Alaska was really strange. I felt like I was in a whole new world. And I got to see a lot more sites than I thought I was going to. I got a lot of time in the field, and some of our trips would be like 8 days long. And I think that was a great experience, not just to show me these new surroundings, but also getting used to like waking up early, doing all these tasks all day, and then being able to do it the next day. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. So did you have to go get more gear since, Alaska is a bit cooler than Nevada, especially in April?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I had in particular no rain gear because it just never rains in Nevada. And so Ryan took me out and got me really good boots and rain gear, stuff like gloves for my hands. My hands were always so cold even when I had gloves. I'm a little bit of a wimp with cold weather, but that was definitely something I had to go get before going out in the field.
Sounds like an excellent experience.
It was very fun. I loved it a lot, and I'm definitely going to remember it for the rest of my life. It was a really great time.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
We have a few more minutes if anybody has another question for Quincy. Right. Okay, thank you, Quincy. Great job.
Thank you.
I will share my screen one more time if you don't mind stopping yours. There we go. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the future of the Career Internship Program. and kind of some new ideas and where we would hope to take it. That involves some feedback and ideas from Erscope staff if you have it. So if you've ever been interested and or have some work that you feel like, yeah, I am going to, sorry.
Okay.
If you ever have ideas or ways that you or projects that you're like, oh, this would be, you know, I could really use some help with that. Like an intern would be a great tool. For me, I have a QR code here, and we'll also, I think, put a link to the form in the chat. So it's a really simple form. It's really just for us to, capture that you are interested in a career intern, and then we can follow up with you separately, kind of talk out the details. I really want to thank the mentors that provided support to the interns. So thank you so much, Ryan and Beth and Scott and Emily. You did a great job. Obviously, your interns presented so well. Big thank you to the Erscope Finance and Business Administration team that we couldn't make any of this happen without you, and the rest of the Erscope staff for coming and supporting. We really appreciate that. And then if you have questions, you can email me directly, or we have internships@erscope.org that come to the internship team, which is myself, Anika, Michael, and Justin Sweet. Thank you all again. So these interns end tomorrow. Feel free to reach out to them if you have follow-up questions before then. Otherwise, we are way above schedule. So thank you, everyone, and have fun with your extra half hour.